Good evening, everyone. I'm Louise Mirror, New York Historical Society's president and CEO, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to tonight's virtual program, The Company I Keep, My Life in Beauty. This special presentation is being offered exclusively for friends of New York Historical by invitation only. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart for your generous support, especially at this challenging time. Just before I introduce our speakers, I want to recognize and thank the chair of New York Historical's Board of Trustees, Pam Schaffler, and our chairman emeritus, Roger Hertog, as well as the chair of our Chairman's Council, Susan Danilo, and all of our New York Historical trustees and members of our Chairman's Council who are joining us this evening. Now then, we are pleased indeed to welcome Leonard Lauder, Chairman Emeritus and former CEO of the Estée Lauder Companies, Inc., where he currently serves as the senior member of the Board of Directors. Mr. Lauder is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School and is a much admired and extraordinary civic leader. After serving in the US Navy, Mr. Lauder officially joined the Estée Lauder Companies in 1958. Focusing on building the company's research and development laboratory and helping to grow the business. In his over 5 decades of leadership, he transformed the company from a brand with 8 products in 1 country to a multi-brand beloved global icon. Mr. Lauder is the author of the recently released memoir, The Company I Keep, My Life in Beauty. If you haven't already read this book, I want to pass along my highest recommendation. Not only will you learn about Mr. Lauder, his family, and the company, but you'll learn a lot about successful leadership with a good deal of worthwhile how-to advice as part of the mix. It is an understatement to say that I learned a lot from reading Mr. Lauder's book. Joining Mr. Lauder this evening as moderator is David Rubenstein. Mr. Rubenstein is the co-founder and co-executive chairman of the Carlyle Group, one of the world's largest private investment firms. He currently chairs the Kennedy Center and the Council on Foreign Relations and is an original signer of the Giving Pledge. Mr. Rubenstein's philanthropic work, dubbed patriotic philanthropy, is legendary and has been recognized with the Carnegie Medal of Philanthropy and MoMA's David Rockefeller Award. Mr. Rubenstein is also the author of 2 books, The American Story, Conversations with Master Historians, and the recently published How to Lead, Wisdom from the World's Greatest CEOs, Founders, and Game Changers. Mr. Rubenstein is also the host of New York Historical's nationally televised PBS series, History with David Rubenstein. Tonight's program will last about an hour. If time allows, we'll include some of the questions we've collected from members of our audience. And now it gives me great pleasure to turn our virtual stage over to our speakers. Thank you and good evening.
Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for watching tonight. And Leonard, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, David. I'm delighted to be here and be with you and Louise and your entire team that with you.
So just to echo what Louise said, over the last 50 years or so, one of the country's most successful business leaders has been Leonard Lauder, but he's also been one of the greatest art collectors in our country over the last 50 years or so. And he's also one of the country's greatest philanthropists. But more important than all that, more important than those things, he is a big supporter of the New York Historical Society. That is his greatest distinction in life. And even more important than that, I regard him as a very good friend. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight with you, Leonard. And Leonard, let's just start off with this book, which I will also echo Louise saying, The Company I Keep is an excellent book. My question to you at the beginning is, you retired as the CEO 20 years ago. While you're still involved in the company, why did you wait 20 years to write this excellent book?
David, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Why? I've been writing this book in my head for my whole life. And that I'm a dreamer by nature and a daydreamer also. And so every time I saw something happen, I said, gee, that's a great story. That would go well in my book. So I waited until my term as CEO and executive chairman ended. I felt that was a good time to end it. And I look back because I talked about how we conceived of the company, what we did, and how we built it forward. Now, building a company that is no longer an infant is different from starting an infancy and building it. And so I started with the infancy of the company. And I think that's the exciting part of my life.
Leonard, in reading this book, you have stories from your childhood that made me embarrassed about how little I remember from my childhood, because I couldn't remember what happened when I was in the 6th grade or 4th grade. How did you remember with great detail what happened when you were a little boy?
Listen, that's remarkable. I don't know why either. I don't remember what I had for dinner yet tonight, but I haven't eaten it yet. But I remember things going way, way back. However, each time something important happened, it set off an enzyme in my brain somehow or other that I remembered it, and I remembered it for life. And that's my memory is one of my most cherished possessions and skills.
Okay, so let's test your memory. How long did it take you to actually write this book? And I'm just curious, when you write a book like this, do you write it out in longhand? Do you dictate it? And did you say in the middle of the process, I wish I hadn't started this, it's too harder than I thought?
Firstly, once I start something, I never stop it. I drop it. Okay, so the way it started was that I would tell stories to myself. By the way, it's so much easier to tell yourself a joke and laugh at it, and to tell yourself a story and say, "Gee, that's great." But I tell myself a story, and then I started to write it really about 3 years ago. And what I did, not longhand, I dictated it. And then the writer I was working with, who was fabulous, took that, transcribed it, and then we worked on it a little bit, changed some of the syntax, etc., and we did some research once in a while, and then read a second draft. Once the draft was ready, that chapter was finished, we went on to another one. I started with an overall outline, but we went through the outline, and I could see it in my mind, step by step by step. And I'll tell you something, I've never had so much fun as doing that.
Okay, but you're not going to write another book now, are you?
Well, I don't know.
Well, it's that much fun. Maybe you should.
With HMS Pinafore, remember what never? Well, never or hardly ever. Okay.
Okay. So let's talk about your early years. When you were born where? In New York City?
I was born in New York City in Women's Hospital, 110th Street, in the West Side.
Okay. And your parents, were they famous people then when you were born?
No, they weren't. My father was a silk importer, and my mother was a young, ambitious, budding actress. But she had skills and ambition. My father was handsome and incredible, and they worked together.
Okay. So, but your mother's maiden name was not Estée anything. It was something different. And
it was a Josephine, and but her middle name was Esther, something like that. But her mother was Hungarian, and Estée, Estey, is a very Hungarian name, and so there's a little bit of Hungarian in the blood and Hungarian in the name.
And you point out in the book that your father's name was Lauter,
Yeah.
and he changed it. What was the reason he changed it?
Because Lauter was pronounced Lauter, and Lauter is not a very lovely name for a cosmetic company.
Okay.
But Lauder, you can Estée Lauder. It's a nice name, Lauder, or in German, Lauder. But anyway, T doesn't work, D does.
So where did they meet each other?
Well, my grandfather was a remarkable man. He bought some land in Westchester County and built a house in Dutch farm design. And my mother was sitting out in the front lawn, and this gorgeous, handsome guy walked by, looked at her and said, "Hi, Blondie," and the rest was history. He introduced himself, and they met, got married at 30.
Was she like that way of introducing himself to her?
I can't tell you what turned her on or turned her off, but I'm glad she got turned on.
Okay. So you were born, I guess, a little bit later after they got married.
1933.
Okay. So you're growing up in New York City, and you grew up on the west side of New York City?
That's right. I grew up on, we lived on 75th Street and West End Avenue. I went to school on 77th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. And I would, after school, many days, I would step out of the school, make a left turn, walk 2 blocks, and there I was in the New York Historical Society. Why do you
Wow.
think I love it so much?
Okay. So when you're growing up in New York, did you realize your mother was doing something to build a great company, or she was just a person who had a little small, tiny business?
The latter. She was doing a small, tiny business. I would come home for lunch every day. So I would come home, she would make me a hot lunch, and I'd sit down in the living room, eating my lunch, and she would be in the next room doing a makeup with someone. And so the two worked together, and the things that she cooked for me then are still my favorite dishes.
So when you were living in New York, then the West Side, was this a palatial kind of apartment building or big, gigantic apartment building?
No, it was a nice apartment building. We had a nice apartment and lovely. And a block to 2 away was the Schwab Mansion, which was a square block built by Charles Schwab. I remember walking with my father one day, and we walked past the Schwab Mansion, which is a beautiful mansion, beautiful large lawn. He says, "You know, I'm thinking of buying that house. You think I should buy it, Leonard?" I said, "No, please. There's too much lawn there, and I can't play with my soldiers on the lawn because everybody will see me." So
Okay.
he never bought the house, thank God.
So when you graduated from high school, you went to Bronx High School of Science?
Wrong size, little size. Yes,
All right. And then you went to University of Pennsylvania
correct.
and graduated third in your class. Is that right?
That's right.
So you were a pretty smart student. But during this time, were you coming home in summers and working in a company that was now called Estée Lauder?
No, in the summertime, I was working at a summer camp. I started off as a waiter, then as a counselor for several years, and I paid very little but enjoyed it. And I was a good counselor. And every step along the way, I learned things. And I can tell you this, that even I learned more working for the camp, working as a counselor, than I could have learned with them for the first year or two.
Well, I was a counselor also, and I can confirm what you say. The pay is very little. But anyway, so you graduate from University of Pennsylvania, third in your class, and you want to go into business. So you decide you're going to go to Harvard Business School. Was that easy to get into Harvard Business School?
No, they turned me down very simply. They asked me why they should accept me when they turned down so many other people. Wasn't prepared for that question. I said, "Well, listen, I understand that that you expect your alumni to support you in one way or another in the long run. I think I'm going to be very successful in business, and I think I can do that." Well, that was probably much too arrogant at the time. Turned down. And so I applied for the US Navy Officer Candidate School. And the best thing I ever did, and the rest is history, and I'm glad they turned me down.
Well, I don't think they are. Have they ever mentioned this to you when looking for money from you, or they haven't come along asking for money?
Never, never.
Okay, so you're in the Navy, and what you try to do in the Navy is be a little businessman. You run a commissary, and I gather you made it work very well. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And what was the trick to making a commissary work well? Having products that all the men wanted?
Well, I did many things. I was what they call at my first job. I have to say, my first job was as dispersing officer. And when I walked in, and one of the petty officers said to me, "Mr. Lauder, you do just what we tell you to do, and you'll be okay." First lesson was listen to the people who know more than you do. Then I became the ship store officer, I've learned so much, and I wanted to have the best ship store in the Navy. And that's all I wanted. I did it. I think I did it.
Now, the Navy wasn't known for being, I would say, the place that attracted the most Jewish boys from New York, was it?
Not at all. But listen, I got through it. I
Okay.
got through it. Yeah.
All right. So when you got through it and you finished the Navy, you came back and you said to your mother, I want to join the family company, or did you consider doing anything else?
Well, they made a big effort to try to get me to ship over the Navy. And believe it or not, I had temptation to do it because I love the Navy, but I decided that the business was for me. And I never really got formal training. I showed up at the office in February 1958, and there's a little tiny desk with two piles of envelopes there, and that's it. And I asked the secretary, what are these envelopes for? She said, open the pile on the left are the orders, and you open the envelopes and you send them out to the plant, and the pile to the right of that is the checks, and you send that to the bookkeeper. They were going for 3 months, and along the way I learned because I had no one to teach me except myself and the people who came to the office. I learned from everyone. And what I learned from that is if you listen to everyone, God gave us 2 ears, you'll learn.
So when you're doing this, you join the company. Did you get a big salary, or your parents were not big payers of big salaries?
It was so small, I could barely support myself. But okay. But anyway, the first guy that I hired, the first executive I hired, the man named Bob Wasfold, I paid him 3 times the amount of money that I was earning at the time. And my father said, how can you pay him so much and you're earning so little? I said, because he's better than I am. And that's how it worked.
So when you're doing this, your specific job is to do what your mother and father weren't doing. Whatever they were doing, you would do everything else. Is that right?
That's right. No one said do this or do that. And that's how you learn.
When you joined the company, did it have $1 billion of sales, or what was the sales?
$800,000 worth of sales.
800,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was it that your mother did that made the company have a product that people wanted? What was it about the product that was better than, let's say, other products? What was it that was unique?
She loved creams and how to make up people's faces. But the thing that really sent us a trajectory into the sky was she created a fragrance called Youth Dew fragrance. And it was such a great fragrance. It was a combination of a bath oil and a perfume. And it was a doubles as a skin, but perfume. So it's a 2 to 1. And the fragrance was so sexy and fabulous that everyone wanted to buy it. I'll tell you a story. My mother hailed a taxi to go downtown to the Plaza Hotel once, and she got into the taxi. And in those days, the New York cabs did not have the screens between front and back. And so the cab driver, who owned his own cab, said, "I know what you're wearing. You're wearing Estée Lauder. All my best clients are wearing that." And she was very flattered. And she got out of the taxi and paid him. And she says, "You know, I'm Estée Lauder." He said, "Yeah, and I'm Cary Grant," and drove away.
So where were the products actually made? I mean, were there scientists or chemists who came up with the products that your mother would say yes or on this one or no on that one? How did the products actually get made?
Well, we had one chemist who was a genius, and he created things. She tested everything and tried everything. Nothing left the lab until she had approved it. And she was really good at that. She approved all the fragrances, she approved all the lipsticks, she approved everything. And step by step, we brought people on who were great specialists in their field. And as time went on, we had the best team in the nation, if not in the world, because she set a standard. which we all had to fill and
Now,
follow.
when your mother was starting in the early days, there were other women who also started companies in this area, like Helena Rubenstein, no relation to me, Elizabeth Arden, and others. The women who did that, were they people who had a sense of beauty or a business sense? What was it that you think these other women had and that your mother had that was distinguished them from all the other people that were trying to start these kind of companies?
They all had the most incredible ambition. Never discount the possibility that ambition can conquer the world. And Helena Rubenstein built a beautiful business, and as did Elizabeth Arden. But they were aging by the time my mother came along.
And when your mother was coming along and with you building the company with your father, there was somebody else in the business who wasn't a woman who built the company, Charles Revson,
Yeah.
built the company called Revlon. And was he a big competitor, or was he the biggest, the 800-pound gorilla in those days?
He was the 800-pound gorilla, but essentially he wasn't our competitor because we were much higher priced and sort of sold a different group of stores. He sold a lot of drugstores and some department stores. We sold specialty stores like Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus in Dallas, etc. But the fact is that he wasn't our competitor, but we were his competitor. And I have a chapter in the book called The Revlon Wars, where we talk about how we had this head-to-head competition. We didn't necessarily win or lose. I think we did win, but it was a big lesson for me as to how to fight and survive.
Well, speaking of that, you point out in your book that at one point he wanted to buy your family's company for what price?
For $1 million. And my mother said, no, listen, I want this business for my son. And so she turned that down. I'm forever grateful for that.
Did you tell her to take the money, or you told her to turn it down also?
She didn't even ask me. She simply told it. She said, I took it. I turned it down and because I wanted it to be for you. Listen, for that, I'm eternally grateful to her.
So when you become as famous as your mother became and you're a visible figure in the beauty world, does it take a lot of time to get organized every day, and you have to be on having the best look all the time? Could she ever let her hair down and just not tell people who she was?
Look, she never left the house without looking beautiful. And when she came home at night, after being in the office or after working during the day, she always wore a hat. She'd come home, go into the kitchen with her hat on, and make dinner. So that what I loved was seeing this woman who's beautifully dressed in the kitchen, dressed in to all her beauty, with a hat on, making me spaghetti and meatballs.
And was her cooking as good as her beauty products?
It was fabulous because she knew how to make things taste right. Yeah.
So as you're building the company with your family and you're spending more and more time on it, you spend time going into the field, so-called, to kind of develop clients and customers. But your main market was department stores or specialty stores, so-called. Was that where you really sold the product?
The main market was specialty stores, like I mentioned, Saks Fifth Avenue or Neiman Marcus or I Magdalene and the West Coast. But what I enjoyed the most was getting to know them. But I also learned to sell, because of the people who didn't want to buy our products. There's stores that didn't want to buy their products. So then what I did was I found ways of becoming so super successful in each store. For example, in Chicago, we attracted so many customers to a promotion that we did on Michigan Avenue that every store in the Midwest wanted to buy the products. So that I was using the success we had with some stores to sell the products to other stores.
So I've often wondered, when you go into a department store, immediately it seems like you smell perfume and other kind of cosmetics. And I always thought maybe they spilled some on the floor accidentally, but that's not accidental, right?
You are so right, because my mother used to throw a bottle down on the floor and break it. Oh my goodness! Oh, I'm so clumsy, and she was clumsy, and she was shrewdly clumsy. That's that's a nice combination.
Now, one of your techniques was that if somebody would buy a product, they would get a free product as well. Is that right?
That's correct. That is called gift with purchase. But she started off in a different way, not with gift with purchase. She started off by giving gifts away that were very large, and you didn't have to buy anything. But she would give away products that she knew once this customer used it, they would use it again and again and again, because it wasn't this big, it was that big, and they came back and bought it.
So at one point, and the company's moving forward, it's doing quite well. You decided to start another part of the company in a different brand called Clinique.
Right.
But that's competing to some extent, I guess, against your main brand, Estée Lauder. Was it controversial to start Clinique?
Well, a little bit in the family. I'll tell you what, we were getting so big that our customers kept on demanding or asking for more promotions and more promotions and more promotions, because they love the business. But I didn't want to over promote. So I said, what we really needed was another company, was another brand. And the other thing I said was this: we're doing so well. What will it take to compete with us? So I thought about what would I do to compete with Estée Lauder. So everything that I did to compete with Estée Lauder was Clinique. And so we had the left and the right.
So the company was a family-owned company and family-run. Your mother, your father, you, your brother, Ronald, and your first wife was in the company. Where did you meet your first wife, by the way?
I met my first wife because I took a 1-week vacation before going into the Navy in 1955, and I went away with my best friend, who then became my best man later on. He met a girl; she became his girlfriend, and I was in OCS, Officer Candidate School. Was coming into New York one weekend. I spoke to him on the phone and said, "I'm coming into New York." And he said, my girlfriend Stephanie is giving a party. I said, well, he said, I said, I'd love to come, but I don't have a date. He said, I'll get you a date. And the date was Evelyn. Now, if I had been accepted to the Harvard Business School, I would never have gone to the Navy or OCS and never have met Evelyn. So someone was up there, was guiding me to the right decision.
So whoever that was, did you give a finder's fee to that person?
Well, he or she is upstairs, and I can't seem to locate them right now.
So as the company is a family-run company, at some point, inevitably in New York and other places, investment bankers show up and say, you know, this is a good company. It'd be a lot better company if it's a public company. So why did you resist for a while going public, and when did you decide you wanted to go public?
Well, at the time, some of the family was in the business and some outside the business. When you are working in a company, you get paid in satisfaction many times. But if you're not in the company, the dividends count, and the dividends mean everything. And so that finally, the decision was made. We're going to go public, and we did it well. I never looked back, and I am happy we did it, even though I miss being a private company where no one knew my numbers and secrecy.
When you went public, I think, was it 1999 or?
The end of 1999, yeah.
1999. At the time, the market value of the company was $4 billion or something?
Something like that, yeah.
$4 billion. Today, the market value is over $70 billion.
Each day, it changes each day, but in the ballpark, yes, David.
So that sounds pretty good. So you must be very proud of having built that with the help of some others.
Yeah. Listen, it wasn't all me. It was I have the greatest team in the world and each one of them feels an ownership there that is unbeatable. And I love them. We love each other, and we love winning.
And you still have family members that are very significantly involved in the operation of the company. Is that right?
Actually, my brother Ronald's the chairman of Clinique. His daughter Jane is the head of marketing, and she does all of our online work, etc. And but we're not a family business. We are a family in business because 99% of the people who work for us are all professionals.
Okay, so when you're building your company, you're not that wealthy, relatively speaking, but you fell in love with art.
Yeah.
And so when did you decide you really wanted to be an art collector? Was that after you decided you liked being a postcard collector? And where did that come from?
Well, the postcard collecting started because I put together a collection of old New York City postcards to talk about the Museum of New York Historical Society. And I love those postcards. And one thing led to another. I started to collect posters, but then I started to buy some art. I was always broke, by the way, always broke. If you are a collector, unless you have billions of dollars, you're always broke. And I bought a few Cubist paintings, and I was sitting in a lecture given by the late Kirk Monado from the Museum of Modern Art on Cubism. And he put on the screen, he said, "This is the most important Cubist painting ever painted, and here's why," and explained. I looked at it and said, "That's my painting on the screen, and that's the most important painting ever." I couldn't believe it. And explained why it was important. And I came away, I said, if I could do that by myself, I'm going to put together a collection that will be worthy of the best museums in the world. And I don't want to keep it because I don't like owning anything. I put the collection together to give it away. And that's how it happened.
Well, your Cubist collection, you have given away to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Why did you pick the Metropolitan Museum?
Well, I had a choice between the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Museum of Modern Art, the National Gallery in Washington, etc. They needed that to make a difference because they were very strong in everything prior to the 20th century. But Cubism was the gateway to the 20th century, and it caused a revolution in art. And so I wanted to find a place for the collection that would be transformative to them. And I believe it was transformative at the Met. Now, it's a promised gift, which goes to them after my passing, although I've given away about half the pieces already. But it was transformative to the Met.
Okay, so building a great collection, maybe the best collection in the world that any collector has of Cubist art would be enough. Why did you get involved with the Whitney and chair that for a long time and be such a big supporter of that? Wasn't the Metropolitan, your Cubism collection enough?
No, never collect. If you're going to be the chairman of a museum, don't collect what they want to collect, because you will someday maybe in competition with them to buy something. So I became the president and the chairman of the Whitney Museum of American Art, and I helped them. They bought over 1,000 plus American paintings for them, none of which I collected, and so that I didn't feel any conflict there.
So one of the most famous works of art in the Whitney is a double flag by Jasper Johns, American flag.
Yeah.
And you helped get that there. Was it, today it's probably worth, I don't know, $200 million or something like that. What did you buy it for in those days?
I bought it for $1 million, which was the most expensive painting, painting by an American artist still living at the time. I remember having lunch with the late Tom Armstrong, who was the director. I said, "Tom, we need to have a painting that becomes our Mona Lisa. the best painting in the city, if not in the nation of America. But we need to make a transformation. What painting would that be? He said, it's Jazz Petron's Three Flags. And he said, however, we'll have to pay $1 million for it then. So we tried to negotiate for it, and the art dealer wanted 10% commission from the owners, Burton and Emily Tremaine. And they didn't want to pay him the commission. But Arnie Glipschner of the Pace Gallery called me and said, I'll do it for nothing. He negotiated it. We bought it for $1 million. I got 5 of our trustees, each threw in some money. We bought the painting. It was on page 1 of the New York Times, below the fold in the left-hand corner, and it was fabulous. And Whitney has never looked back from that, because that was transformative to the Whitney also.
Now, you've also been involved heavily in various health-related causes. One of them is breast cancer. How did you get involved in that, and what are you now doing in breast cancer?
Well, my wife, Evelyn, had breast cancer, and she was passionate about preventing it and curing it and helping people who had it. And so I became her financial partner, as it were, in the things she wanted to do. She started the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, did a fabulous job with it, and I supported her to the hilt. And with that, we have lowered the death rate from the breast cancer by something like 40% in the United States. And there's no looking back. We're gonna cure this disease. Now, people don't die from breast cancer, by the way. They die from the metastasis of breast cancer, and we're working on that now.
Now, tragically, your wife passed away from ovarian cancer a number of years ago.
Yes.
But you talk about in your book, your wife, Judy. How did you know Judy?
We were building a house in Aspen, and I went to an opening at the Aspen Art Museum in 1981, when we were still working on a house in Aspen. And I walked into the reception, and there was this beautiful woman with blue eyes, fabulous hair, looked wonderful, and no one was talking to her. And David, you know me well enough. You don't walk into a room with a beautiful woman and don't talk to her. I talked to her. It turned out that she and her husband had just bought a house in Aspen, which is the house that we had turned down. We had turned it down because it was a beautiful house, but it had a dark room and I didn't need one. She was a photographer and needed a dark room. We became the best of friends. I gave a eulogy at her husband's funeral, and it wasn't long after that we were able to be together.
Okay, and so now your combined family, you have a lot of children and grandchildren, I assume.
I can't count that many.
Okay, so let me ask you now about what you're most proud of having done. You've done a lot of philanthropy and art and business. Is there one thing that you would say, this is what I'm most proud that I've done so far?
The thing that I'm proudest of is making a difference with people, making a difference in the museum world, making a difference in the health world, making a difference in New York City. For example, I started to rebuild the playgrounds in Central Park because they're all dangerous. And to this day, every playground in New York, in Central Park, has been rebuilt by someone else. That was small philanthropy. Everything that I've done has to make a difference. I started something at the University of Pennsylvania, named after my father, the Lauder Institute for International Studies. We taught every business student, every MBA student, a second language or a third language if they needed it, because I wanted to have the United States be able to export. So you have to make a difference. It's like footprints in the sand. The ocean washes away the footprints. I wanted to make a difference no matter where I went.
Now, one of the other healthcare causes that you've been involved with is Alzheimer's. What attracted you to that? And you point out in your book that your mother, toward the end of her life, had that as well.
Well, my mother had it, her sister had it, her mother had it, and so that I knew this was something that I had to do. And we're getting close. We are that far away from having a prevention and a cure. And there's a good reason for me to want to do it. I don't want to get it either.
Well, you obviously don't have anything even approaching it because you're obviously as sharp as can be. What do you do to keep mentally so sharp? I realize Alzheimer's some is genetic, but what do you do to stay mentally sharp?
Firstly, exercise. And then number two, eat well, don't overeat, stay trim, get sleep, and meditate.
Meditate.
Yeah.
Is that something new in life you've started, or you've been always the meditator?
I'm a meditator. I daydream. My late wife Evelyn used to say, "Leonard, come in, Leonard, earth to Leonard," because I'd be looking over, and you have to think. I never stopped thinking about anything.
So let me ask you a little bit about the beauty industry, which you obviously helped revolutionize. In the beauty industry, it is often said that so much money is spent on advertising and packaging, and that's why prices are often expensive for products. Is that true or not?
Not true. Not true. Look, you spend money on advertising if you have to. The money that we spent was giving away large samples of each product that we made. It's try before you buy, and that was the way where we did it. We did some advertising, yes, and I was proud of the advertising I did. We did some TV advertising. I was proud of that also. But I did not do the photography, but I chose the ads and et cetera, and chose the headlines, and I love that.
So in advertising in magazines, fashion magazines or other magazines, they often have these pieces of paper where you pull the paper out and you can smell the perfume or something. Is that still being done very much? And does that sell a lot of perfume?
No, it's being done far less because everyone that does it. The main thing today is sampling. Now, with the COVID, our lipstick business has gone down. Our eyeshadow business is up because they're wearing masks. Lipstick business is down. Creams are up, and fragrances is up. So
who buys fragrances the most, women or men? I mean, women for themselves or men for women?
Women buy it the most, and men buy some for women. But we set out to do this. If you sell a woman, she'll always buy it again and again and again and again, and sell the women. So a youth do. Our number one fragrance at the time was the most copied fragrance and knocked off fragrance by our competitors. I'm not going to mention their name, but if you smell it, you don't necessarily be sure there's not a knockoff.
So in the business of let's say creams, which is your mother first started out in creams, do you have creams for men if men don't want to have wrinkles too?
Well, we have something for men. We have a brand called Aramis, and that does well, but the men's business is rather small. But I have to tell you a story that when we were going public, I went on the road show. 2 or 3 people go and they sell the stock. We were sitting in an office in New York City. This is there wasn't an audience. It was just me trying to sell one of the houses, one of the banking houses. And I was sitting next to a young woman in her early 30s, very attractive woman. She kept on staring at me. I said, "Gee, I must be pretty cool for her to be looking at me all the time." And after I finished, I said, "Are there any questions?" She said, "Yes, I have a question." "Yes, ma'am. If your product is so good, how come you have so many lines?" So,
what was your answer?
My answer is, our products are great for women, and I have not used as many products as I should, but if I use them all, I would look so fabulous, you wouldn't even believe my age. But
Now,
the other thing I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to look young, stay out of the sun or use a heavy sunscreen.
so with fragrances, does a chemist come up with a fragrance and then you or your mother used to smell it? Did you approve every one of the products, or did your mother approve every product?
At the beginning, she did, and then she hired we hired a wonderful young woman named Karen Curry, who worked for me for many years, just retired, but she still does a lot of work with us. And I would ask her, Karen, is this a good fragrance? She said, yes. I said, then launch it. You have to trust the people that you're working with. And if they say it's a good product, you trust them and do it. Because I did not want to be the one to sit there and smell everything and try every lipstick and try every cream. That's not my job. My job was to hire, train, and retain and support the people who work for us.
Now, in your company, over the years, you developed a lot of products like Clinique and so forth, but you later on, you started buying products. And why did you start buying other companies? And how did that work when you bring in something that has a different culture than the culture of your main brand?
Well, if you launch your own brand, it's a very expensive proposition. And it costs you a lot of money, and you lose a lot of money. I lost 35 or $40 million in the launch of Clinique. However, when you're a public company, as we are now, you can't afford to lose 35 or $40 million. So if you buy a company, it doesn't hit your P&L statement, the profit and loss statement. So that we buy the companies now, many of them still have the founders. We like the founders, but it's a different way of accounting, really. But I like buying the companies.
Like one of them you mentioned in your book is MAC.
Mac,
MAC, they have a much different culture than Estée Lauder.
totally, yeah.
And it worked out though.
It worked out. Listen, if you had, I could not even dream of being the one who would create Mac, because how could a nice kid from the west side of New York City help to create Mac? So I buy companies with people who are smarter than me. The world is full of people who are better than you are. Learn from them. And if they have a company for sale, buy it.
So Leonard, we have from our members a few questions that have come in, and I'm going to ask you if you can respond to these questions. And let me give you the first one. In the course of your extraordinary life, you've been a leader in many different areas. What are the keys to being a good leader in your view? 2 or 3 of the most important lessons or secrets to good leadership. So what is the key to being a good leader?
Firstly, listen to people. Be kind and listen. And the third thing is to respect everyone that works for you. Because if you respect them, they'll respect you. That's the key to great leadership.
Okay. A second question is, any big ambitions at this stage of your life other than staying healthy? What is your secret to staying healthy? So your ambitions now and your secrets of staying healthy.
Firstly, staying healthy. I watch what I eat. I'm such a cheapskate, by the way. I can't put on a pound, because if I put on too much weight, I have to then buy a new suit. So I don't want to do that. So stay trim, get exercise, sleep well, get some, and have a very good diet, and also think quietly. And it'll be amazing that in this new era where we don't have the excitement every single day of something that's happening in Washington, it may be easier for everyone. I think, I know.
So how are you staying healthy during this COVID period of time? Are you mostly staying in the house and so forth, and you're going to get vaccinated, or have you been vaccinated already?
I've had my first shot because of the age I am. I'm 87, so I got a shot. I'm on the phone all the time. And the one problem I have is that when I'm on the phone all the time, I'm sitting down on the phone, and everyone's trying to get me up and walk while you're on the phone. And I am in touch with the people who work for us. I'm in touch with the press. I'm in touch with people around the world. I love the people who I've interfaced with over the years, and that gives me the energy to keep going.
Okay. A third question is, if you could do it all over again, would you do anything differently? Any regrets?
There isn't a single regret that I have in my whole life, none at all. And every decision I've made is a good decision. So, for example, I think we decided to build a house in Aspen. And my mother said, why don't you build a house here in East Hampton? I said, no, Aspen's where I want to be. I have no regrets doing that. My children all came there later on. I have no regrets about anything because I celebrate my decisions. And the only thing that I regret is not following my instincts if I've had an instinct on something. Always follow your instinct because your heart knows often what your head can barely comprehend.
Okay. Another question is, what do you hope to be your ultimate legacy? What do you hope will be your ultimate legacy?
There are two or three. Number one, I'd love to see Estée Lauder go on into the next century and beyond, producing great products for women and for men in the world. Number two, I like the museums that I've been involved with, the Whitney Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the New York Historical Society, to go on into history. And I want to please say, you have a great mission in the Historical Society. You are the keepers of the flame. And I hope that the people who are listening know that their support of the New York Historical Society is probably the best thing they can do in the world. And God bless them all for doing that.
Why do you care so much about history and American history, as I know you do? Has it been something you've always been interested in?
It's just something I've always been interested in from as early as I can remember. When I was about 8 or 10, I was sent to a boarding school in Miami Beach. And what they had in their library was the books, the textbooks for the history courses through the 8th grade in New York City public schools. I sat down and read them all. I've read, absorbed, inhaled American history books, inhaled them. And I learned so much because the American history is my history. And I care less about ancient history. I care more about the American experiment. And this is the moment now to celebrate this nation because we are a great nation. And I want to read more about it and learn how I can help this become an even greater nation.
So let me tell two stories about Leonard. About maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was about 100 degrees in Florida. I was in Palm Beach, and I'm walking along on my daily walk, which is not that long. And I'm walking along, and I see somebody walking ahead of me, and he's got some walking sticks and so forth. So I said, okay, I'm going to have to walk around him, I guess. But I said, I don't know who else is crazy enough to be walking in 100-degree heat. So as I walked around, I looked at it and it was Leonard. There he was. So you must do a walk every day, no matter what the weather is, right?
I do every day. Exactly.
And then another time I was down in Palm Beach with my daughter, and we were doing a walk together. And if we were walking down this street, I said, well, I know the person that lives in that house. And she said, I don't really think you really do. Who is it? I said, it's Leonard Lauder and his wife. She said, are you sure? Maybe they're in. I said, well, I don't think they'll be here. She said, why don't you knock on the door? So there's a guard there. And I said, is Leonard in today? And he said, usually when I see people coming up to me, they say, their question is not, is Leonard in? They say, who lives in this great house? So you asked a different question. I said, actually, I know him. And he said, I'm sure. He rolled his eyes and said, sure, everybody says they know who lives here. I said, no, I really know him. And see if he's in. Just say, I'd like to say hello. So 5 minutes later, he came back, or actually 2 minutes later, he came back and said, you're invited in. Come on in for lunch. So I went in, and my daughter and I had a very enjoyable lunch with you and Judy. And she gave me a great copy of her new book that deals with the Holocaust and photographs relating to Denmark in the Holocaust period of time. And we had a very enjoyable lunch, and it was healthy. And I felt, we had a great time. So we talked a little bit about the book then, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I would urge you to write another book, because this one is terrific to read. It's a great life story. It's a great life you've led. And I hope you're very proud. And I'm sure your mother was very proud, and your father was very proud of what you achieved. So congratulations on being a great role model for so many people as a philanthropist, art collector, and businessman. Leonard, thank you very much.
And David, thank you for being such a great host and interviewing me in the greatest way possible. You've made me feel fabulous, and it's now time to leave and have a great dinner. And I'm going to have a great dinner, and I'll toast you at dinner.
All right, thank you very much. And I want to thank the New York Historical Society and Louise Mirror, the CEO, and for making all this possible. Good night, Leonard. Good night, everybody.
David, good night now.